Welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of the National Transit Institute, I welcome you and thank you for participating. The National Transit Institute develops, promotes, and delivers training and education programs for the public transit industry in the United States. Today's webinar is, as you can see on the screen, NTD, Reduced and Rural Safety and Security Reporting, which is the S&S-60 safety data. We are pleased to have as our presenters today, Taisha West and Courtney Springer. Assisting with Q&A in the Q&A box will be analyst James Overbeek. And speaking of the Q&A box, during today's presentation, please ask any question you have at any time in the dedicated Q&A box, which you should be able to find in your menu bar. We ask that you put it in the Q&A box so we can have a record of either the spoken answers or the typed out answers, which will be made available for download on the YouTube page where we host all of our past webinars for your reference. I can put that link in the box, in the chat box in just a second. And speaking of the chat box, that's where everybody can chat and say hello to each other. Now, I know sometimes questions do appear in the chat box. I will try to pluck them out when I see them, but please know that the dedicated Q&A box is probably where you want to ask your questions. I will also, when I finally stop talking, we'll be pasting a link into the chat box that will allow you to download the handouts if you have not done so already. And I think that is it for me. I will now be turning the presentation over to Taisha. Take it away.
Thank you, Lori. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Reduced and Rural Reporting Safety and Security Data webinar. As Lori said, my name is Taisha West, and I am joined by Courtney Springer and James Overbeek. Courtney will be assisting me with today's webinar, and James will be assisting us with the Q&A feature. If you have any questions as we go through our presentation, please feel free to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of the screen. As a disclaimer, the contents of this presentation are intended to provide clarity regarding the existing requirements of the FTA and NTD. Please feel free to refer to the statutes and regulations for requirements. Here's the agenda for this afternoon. First, we will do a quick overview of safety and security, S&S data requirements. Then move on to important changes and clarifications for the 2023 report year. Next, we will discuss S&S thresholds for major and non-major events, physical and non-physical assaults on transit workers, and lastly, we will review other S&S reportable events. The goal of this webinar is to review important changes and clarifications for the 2023 report year and to provide an overview of new S&S data requirements for reduced and rural reporters, and how to report those requirements in the NTD reporting system. Here's the contact information for the National Transit Database, or NTD. If you encounter any technical issues with the system, you may contact the FTI IT Help Desk. If you need assistance with the S&S-60 form, you should contact your validation analyst first. If your validation analyst is out of the office, please feel free to contact meaning the NTD, help desk. Courtney and my contact information is listed here. Along with our information, we also have Ann Singleton's contact information. Ann is the NTD Safety Validation Team Lead. Please contact us if you have any questions regarding today's presentation. If you are unsure who your validation analyst is, please feel free to email us and we will put you in contact with your agency's assigned analyst. In addition to our contact information, we also wanted to provide the NTD management contacts here, Chelsea Chamlin and Joe Eldridge. First, we will begin with a quick overview of the changes for the S&S data requirements. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or BIL, was passed in November 2021. The law requires NTD to collect all assaults on transit workers regardless of whether or not they were injured. To clarify, the presence of an injury or lack thereof will determine where the event should be reported, either by form type or form sections, which we will get into later. Additionally, the NTD has always collected data on assaults, regardless of who was injured, as long as there was an injury. In July 2022, FTA published a Federal Register notice detailing the new S&S requirements. In February 2023, FTA published the final register notice with their responses to comments that were submitted. Here we offer another comparison table for pre and post BIL reporting requirements. As you can see, post BIL, you will report assaults on transit workers in addition to the major events, injuries, and fatalities that you are already reporting. These requirements not only apply to rule and reduce reporters, but now also apply to asset-only reporters. These agencies will continue to report on an annual basis with their annual NTD report, which is due approximately 4 months after their fiscal year ends. The new form for rule reduced and asset-only reporters is called Safety Data, or S&S-60. This is a screenshot of the bottom of the RR20 form, where safety data was previously reported. This section has been replaced with the S&S-60 form, so you will no longer see it on the RR20 form beginning this report year. This is a screenshot of the S&S-60 form. The first section, Physical Assaults on Transit Workers, covers major and non-major events, operator injuries, other transit worker injuries, other injuries, operator fatalities, other transit worker fatalities, and other fatalities that occurred in the transit vehicle, in the revenue facility, in the non-revenue facility, and in other locations. The second section, Non-Physical Assaults on Transit Workers, covers major and non-major events, operator injuries, other transit worker injuries, other injuries, operator fatalities, other transit fatalities, and other fatalities that occurred in a transit vehicle, in a revenue facility, in a non-revenue facility, and in other locations. Other locations are those such as the street, involving a transit vehicle but not on a transit vehicle or in a transit vehicle, or on the right-of-way but not in a station. The important distinction is that this form will capture major and non-major assaults on transit workers. In the second section, you also have the option to include additional details, such as the times of day, whether transit vehicles involved were equipped with anti-assault infrastructure, whether the assaults were physical attacks, verbal harassment, threats of violence, involved weapons, whether or not law enforcement responded to the assault, etc. Anti-assault infrastructure includes operator compartment barriers, silent alarms, audio-visual surveillance, etc. This is a screenshot of the bottom portion of the S&S-60 that was not shown in the previous slide. This section is for collecting other reportable safety and security data. You will report major events, fatalities, and injuries for collisions with pedestrians, vehicles, and other collisions, and other major events. You will also report total reportable injuries from non-major events. Again, the S&S-60 form is only available to reduce reporters, Rural General Public Transit, or RGPT reporters, and asset-only reporters. In previous report years, these reporters reported safety data at the bottom of the RR20 on their annual NTD report. However, beginning this year, report year 2023, that section was removed and replaced with a new annual form called the S&S-60 Safety Data Form. The S&S-60 form has expanded sections to include physical assaults, non-physical assaults, and all other reportable safety and security data. For an event to be considered reportable, it must occur on transit right-of-way or infrastructure at a transit revenue facility or maintenance facility during a transit-related maintenance activity or involve a transit revenue vehicle and meet reporting thresholds. This does not include events at bus stops or shelters that are on non-transit owned property unless a passenger is boarding or alighting or involves a transit vehicle. Likewise, this does not include events that occur off transit property where a victim came to rest on transit property after an event. Major events include collisions, fires, security events, hazardous material spills, acts of God, and other safety events. Other safety events are events that do not fall into the threshold for categories of collisions, fires, security events, hazardous material spills, or acts of God, but meet certain thresholds. The exception to this is when one or more persons is immediately transported for medical attention. The thresholds include fatality and injury, estimated damage equal to or exceeding $25,000, collisions, and evacuations. More specifically, fatalities must be confirmed within 30 days of the event and include suicides. Injuries must require immediate attention away from the scene for one or more people. Collisions involve transit revenue vehicles that require towing away from the scene or meet the injury, fatality, property damage, or evacuation threshold. They include suicides, attempted suicides, assaults, or homicides that result in an injury or fatality that involve contact with the transit vehicle, or collisions that do not involve a transit vehicle but meet a threshold. Evacuations must be at a transit facility or on a transit vehicle for life safety reasons. Fatalities must be reported if they are confirmed to have occurred within 30 days of the event. They do not include illnesses, drug overdoses, and other natural causes, including individuals who are found deceased, or fatalities of individuals found deceased as a result of exposure to the elements. We will go over examples in the next slide. It is important to note if a fatality occurs more than 30 days after the event, it should not be reported. For the first example, if a transit vehicle is involved in an accident with a pedestrian and the pedestrian passes away within 30 days of the event, it must be reported. If an individual jumps out in front of a transit vehicle and commits suicide, it must be reported. As a reminder, fatalities include suicide, so that is why this example is reportable. If a passenger suffers a heart attack while on a transit vehicle, it should not be reported. While we do not know the passenger's medical history, we do know that heart attacks are related to illnesses and/or natural causes, and those are excluded from fatalities. If there's a shooting near a transit facility and the victim comes into the facility to escape but is found deceased, that should not be reported. Anytime someone is found deceased, it is not reportable. If a person is damaged or harmed and requires medical attention away from the scene because of a reportable event, it should be reported as an injury. If a person does not appear to be injured but seeks immediate medical attention, it should be reported. It is important to note that individuals must receive medical attention at a location other than where the event occurred and must seek medical attention by vehicular transport, meaning a transit vehicle, an ambulance, another emergency vehicle, a private vehicle, or a stretcher to the hospital. This means that medical attention sought hours or days later and/or minor first aid or other minor medical assistance received at the scene does not qualify and should not be reported. We will go over examples in the next slide. If a passenger in a non-transit vehicle was involved in an accident with a transit vehicle and does not appear to be injured, but takes an ambulance to the hospital to be evaluated, it must be reported. If a passenger on a transit vehicle hits their face on a pole during an accident and a friend drives them to the dentist, it must be reported. Although a friend is driving them, that friend's vehicle is considered a private vehicle. Going to the dentist is considered seeking medical attention. If a passenger in a non-transit vehicle was involved in an accident with a transit vehicle and walked to the hospital, it should not be reported. Although they are going to seek medical attention, they are not doing so by vehicular transport, so the event is not reportable. If a transit vehicle passenger decides their back is hurting 2 days after an accident, and they want to seek medical attention because they think it may be related to the accident, it should not be reported because they did not seek immediate medical attention. Not all events are reported as major events. If an event is not the result of a collision, fire, security event, hazardous material spill, or act of God, it should be reported as a non-major event. This includes slips, trips, falls, smoke events, fumes, and electric shock. However, the event should be reported as a major event instead of a non-major event if it meets the fatality, evacuation, or property thresholds, or results in 2 or more injured persons. We will go over examples and clarify them in the next slide. In our first scenario, a transit vehicle passenger fell down the steps and immediately went to the hospital. This will be reported under total reportable injuries from non-major events at the bottom of the S&S-60 form because the passenger immediately sought medical attention, but it did not trigger any major event reporting thresholds. In our second scenario, a transit vehicle passenger tripped and fell over another passenger's feet. Both passengers immediately went to the doctor's office. This would be reported as a major event because it resulted in 2 injured persons. I will now turn the remainder of the presentation over to Courtney Springer.
Okay, thank you, Taisha. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Courtney Springer, and I will take us through how to complete the new safety data S&S-60 form. And before I jump into that, could I just get a quick acknowledgement that you guys can hear me all right and that you can see my screen?
Sounds perfect.
Okay, thank you. I know I always ask, but I'm going to ask one more time.
Oh, no, it's better to be safe than sorry.
All right. So here is an overview of the S&S-60 form. And I do understand that the table headers may be a little hard to read in these screenshots, but we will review each of these sections in more detail over the next few slides. So the first table in this form is physical assaults on transit workers. The second table is non-physical assaults on transit workers. And the third table is all other reportable safety and security data. We will start by reviewing the first 2 tables of the form, which relate to assaults on transit workers. Transit worker assaults can be categorized into 2 options: physical assaults and non-physical assaults. Physical assaults involve physical contact with a transit worker, including any contact with the attacker's body, a weapon, a projectile, or any other item. And projectiles may include, but are not limited to, bullets, liquids, the assailant's saliva, or any other substance. Non-physical assaults do not involve physical contact with the transit worker and may include verbal threats, harassment, or interference with the worker's duties. So here is a closer view of the table, physical assaults on transit workers. So the columns in this form provide 4 location options: physical assaults in transit vehicle, physical assault in revenue facility, physical assaults in non-revenue facility, or physical assaults in other location. And we'll go through each of these locations now. So revenue facilities are facilities or areas that a passenger uses to board or deboard from a transit vehicle using a platform, which may include stairs, elevators, escalators, passenger controls, canopies, wind shelters, ticket office or machines, restrooms, or concessions. A non-revenue facility is a facility or area that is not used to enable individuals to board or alight from transit vehicles, and that is primarily staffed by transit employees. Other locations are locations that are not in a revenue or non-revenue facility and are not transit vehicles. So this selection is used to capture events that did not occur in any of the previously listed locations. So for example, if a transit worker is pushed into a stationary transit vehicle on the roadway, that would be reported as a physical assault in other location. If a physical assault met a reporting threshold for major safety events, such as resulting in an injury or fatality, report a count of events in the first row, major safety and security events. If a physical assault occurred but did not meet a major reporting threshold, report a count of events in the second row, non-major events, non-injury. The next two sections allow you to report any injuries or fatalities that resulted from the physical assaults reported on the major safety and security events row. And both of these sections provide three options for person type. So we have operators, other transit workers, and other. An operator is an individual who is compensated by the transit agency and whose function is to operate the transit vehicle. An other transit worker is an individual who is compensated by the transit agency or who is otherwise providing specific services at the agency. And this category also includes volunteers. The other category represents non-transit workers. If any injuries or fatalities resulted from the major events you report at the top of the form, report a count of those injuries or fatalities in the appropriate categories. Here are a couple of example scenarios to demonstrate how you would report physical assaults on transit workers. In scenario 1, a passenger boards a bus but refuses to pay the fare. The passenger spits on the operator, but the operator declines transport for medical attention and resumes service. In this case, you would report one physical assault in transit vehicle under non-major events. In scenario 2, a trespasser enters a transit maintenance yard and throws a water bottle at a maintenance technician. The technician also declines transport for medical attention and resumes working duties. In this scenario, you would report one physical assault in non-revenue facility, also under non-major events, since this did not result in an injury. We will now look at the next table in the S&S-60 form, non-physical assaults on transit workers. The columns and rows for this table are identical to the table physical assaults on transit workers, but these refer exclusively to instances where no physical contact occurred with the transit worker. Again, the columns in this form provide the same four location options: non-physical assaults in transit vehicle, non-physical assaults in revenue facility, non-physical assaults in non-revenue facility, or non-physical assaults in other location. The table also provides fields for reporting major or non-major events, as well as the same injury and fatality categories, again, for operators, other transit workers, and other. Let's look at a couple of scenarios on how to report non-physical assaults. In scenario 1, on a transit bus, a passenger threatens the operator with a weapon and is arrested by transit police. The bus operator is transported for distress. In this case, because the operator was transported, you would report one major safety and security event, as well as one operator injury, under non-physical assault in transit vehicle. In scenario 2, in a bus transfer facility, a passenger engages in a verbal altercation with a station agent and spits on the ground in front of the agent. The passenger exits the facility and the agent declines transport. Because the assailant's saliva did not make contact with the agent, you would report one non-major event under non-physical assault in revenue facility. The form provides an optional text box in case you would like to provide any additional details about the physical or non-physical assaults you report. Additional details may include when the assault occurred, the type of assault, and any anti-assault infrastructure your agency may have had in place, or any other information you choose to include. And again, this is an optional field. We will now cover the third and final section of the S&S-60 form, all other reportable safety and security data. So this section is an expanded table of the former safety data section, which, as Taisha mentioned, was previously located at the bottom of the reduced reporting RR20 form. The former safety data section included 3 fields: reportable incidents, fatalities, and injuries. This section has been migrated to the S&S-60 form and expanded to include more detailed information related to collisions. This section also includes a new field for reporting injuries, which result from non-major events, which we will cover in just a few slides. First, we will review the 3 collision options in this section. Previously, you would report a count of all major events, including but not limited to collisions. In the S&S-60 form, you should report an annual count of collisions with pedestrians, collisions with vehicles, and collisions with other, which can include things like animals, manholes, shopping carts, or other objects. You should only report collisions in this section if they meet one of the major event criteria, which Taisha reviewed earlier in this presentation. But as a reminder, the thresholds are listed here. If any of these collisions result in an injury or fatality, report an annual count under the appropriate column. For example, if a collision with a vehicle resulted in 1 injury, you would report 1 under major events to the row collisions with pedestrians, and you would also report 1 under injuries to the same row. You may also report a count of other major events, which are major events excluding collisions, which meet a major event reporting threshold. Some examples include fires, security events, hazardous material spills, or acts of God. Again, report a count of other major events in this section, as well as any resulting injuries or fatalities if they are applicable. Lastly, we will review the field total reportable injuries from non-major events. So these are events that are not included in the major event categories like collisions, fires, or hazmat spills. Non-major event types include slips, trips, falls, smoke events, fumes, and electric shock. If any of these events result in a fatality, evacuation, or property damage exceeding $25,000, you should report them as major events. You should also report these as major events if they result in 2 or more injured persons. If any of these events do not meet the fatality, evacuation, or property damage thresholds and only result in 1 injury, you should report them under total reportable injuries from non-major events. So for example, if a smoke event results in 1 injury, that would be reported in the field total reportable injuries from non-major events. If the same smoke event resulted in 2 injuries, that would be reported under other major events with 2 corresponding injuries. Let's look at a few scenarios that demonstrate how to complete this section of the S&S-60. In scenario 1, a transit vehicle collides with a personal vehicle in a busy intersection. One passenger complains of back pain because of the collision and is transported to seek immediate medical attention. In the S&S-60 form, on the row collision with vehicles, you would report 1 under major events as well as 1 injury, since 1 person was transported to seek medical attention. In scenario 2, a transit maintenance facility experiences a hazardous material spill. The maintenance workers evacuate the facility for life safety reasons with no resulting injuries or fatalities. On the row, other major events, because this hazmat spill met the evacuation threshold, you would report 1 under major events, and you would not report any injuries or fatalities. In scenario 3, a passenger slips and falls while boarding a transit vehicle. The passenger complains of wrist pain and is transported to seek medical attention. In this case, you would report 1 under total reportable injuries from non-major events. You would report 1 in this field because this was a non-major event, a slip and fall, which resulted in only 1 injury. In scenario 4, a bus operator brakes hard to avoid hitting a deer that entered the roadway. 2 passengers fall because of the hard brake, and both must be transported from the scene to seek immediate medical attention. You would report 1 under other major events with 2 injuries. You would report this as a major event because this was a fall which resulted in 2 injuries, making it a major event. Again, non-major event types such as slips, trips, or falls become major events if they result in 2 or more injuries. So again, here's the contact information for the NTD Operations Center, as well as the contact information for this afternoon's presenters. Also listed on this slide is the contact information for the safety validation team lead and Singleton. Again, if your agency reports to the NTD and you have a question about how to report a specific safety or security event, please reach out to your assigned NTD validation analyst. Again, if you're not sure who your analyst is, please reach out to me or Taisha, and we'll be happy to put you in touch. Thank you again for listening in this afternoon. We will now open up for questions, and I will turn it over, I believe, back to Lori.
Hi. So there's there's no currently open questions. If anybody has a question, we can sit here in uncomfortable silence and wait for you to type. So let's do that. And if there are no questions, we'll give everyone their afternoon back. Heather, that's not a question. So Ed is asking, what makes you a reduced and rural reporter? Anyone?
Hi, thanks for that question. Yeah, so there are a few different reporting thresholds for essentially reduced and rural reporters are 2 different types of reporter types in the NTD. We're primarily referring to urban reduced reporters who are agencies who do not meet the reporting thresholds for being a full reporter. There are a handful of thresholds to distinguish full versus reduced reporters. I would encourage you to refer to the NTD policy manual to get a full feel of all of these different requirement types. Rural reporters are agencies who do not receive FTA 5307 funding, and they do not serve an urbanized area or a UZA. These two reporting modules are distinct in NTD. If you have any more specific questions for, what makes you a reduced or rural reporter, I'd encourage you to reach out to your analyst or to me and Taisha, and we'd be happy to provide more information.
Thank you. Okay, wait, done. Melanie asks, can you describe the revenue facilities and non-revenue facilities again?
Sure, yeah. So revenue facilities are basically used by passengers to access transit service. So this can be something like a bus transfer facility. They also refer to rail, like passenger stations, even though we don't have rail operators in the reduced module. But they're facilities or areas that passengers use to board or deboard from transit vehicles. We have some examples laid out in the NTD policy manual. Taisha can link that in the chat to include the full definition and some examples. A non-revenue facility is essentially a transit facility that's not used by passengers to access transit vehicles. So this can be a transit maintenance facility, it could be a transit administrative facility, really any sort of transit facility that's not used to facilitate, passenger access to transit vehicles.
This is from Dorothy. We are a rural provider. Most drivers are in county on their own. I can see confusion as to what constitutes assault, as I'm sure they often encounter belligerent or difficult passengers. Is there guidance for drivers and best practices on how to report?
Sure. So my understanding is that FTA encourages agencies to use their best discretion for determining, what their individual practices are for collecting data related to assault on transit workers. I would like to actually defer this question to James Overbeek, our dedicated safety analyst, to see if he has any additional information to provide, if he's received any other guidance or information in the safety validation module on this.
Yeah, thanks, Courtney. So this is a great question, one we get a lot with our full reporters as well. There are definitions in the 2024 safety policy manual. There isn't any specific guidance on like how to collect these, but I'll just point you to the assault on a transit worker definition, which is a circumstance in which an individual knowingly, without lawful authority or permission, and with intent to endanger the safety of any individual or with reckless disregard for the safety of human life, interferes with, disables, or incapacitates a transit worker while the transit worker is performing the duties of the transit worker. So there has to be some intent there. It's not just every expletive that's said towards an operator or worker, and there has to be or reckless disregard for that transit worker. So those are kind of the main points to look at for these assaults on transit workers. But I would recommend taking a look at the 2024 Safety and Security Policy Manual, which has those definitions laid out a little bit more.
Thanks, James. This is from Stephen. Should MPOs ask transit operators to provide copies of everything provided to NTD for injury/incident and assault claims?
Hi, sure. So that I believe would also be at the MPO's discretion. There's no NTD requirement for MPOs to collect that data. That would be for them to decide.
This is from Danielle. Oh, Danielle asked for a link to the manual, but Taisha, I think you already pasted it.
Yes, I put it in the chat, but I'm going to put it in her question as well.
Yeah, it's in the, Danielle, it's in the chat. I don't know. It might, no, it's not scrolled up. I don't know. I don't know why you can't see it. Unless it was a different manual. Don't listen to me. I'm not a subject matter person. Okay, oh, okay, Daniel. This is from Janet. If there was an assault between two passengers on a transit vehicle, would it be reportable?
Sure. So that would, if it resulted in an injury or a fatality or one of the other major event reporting thresholds, it would be reported in that other major events section. It wouldn't be captured in the first two tables, the physical or non-physical assaults on transit workers, if there's no transit worker assault involved. So passenger on passenger assaults would be reported as an other major event if it met a threshold like an injury.
So that was the last open question. You have one? Type fast. All right, well, I don't know if there's any more questions. So I'm going to start. Oh, wait, there's something in the chat. The reduced reporting manual link says full reporting. Is this the right link? Taisha?
I'll resend it.
She's going to resend it. Okay, try that one.
Should be there.
All right. Well, unless something comes in while I'm just saying thank you to everybody, there seems to be no more open questions. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Taisha, Courtney, James. We really appreciate your expertise and your time. I want to remind everybody, you will receive an email from me with a link to take a survey/evaluation for the session. Please just spend a couple of seconds doing it so we can get your feedback. And I guess that's it. We have a few more webinars. You can check our catalog page to see when they are. If it pertains to you, sign up, and we will see you next time. Thanks, everybody.